A note to my audience. Today I will be presenting in the style of Pecha Kucha, which consists of 20 slides, each appearing for exactly 20 seconds. Pecha Kucha was developed by two Tokyo-based architects with the purpose of creating a concise and engaging presentation. What do you think of when you hear the word doctor? I asked. I was speaking in an online career panel for Black high schoolers. Responses began to populate the Zoom chat. Hero, medicine, caretaker, death. I did a quick double take. Tell me more about that, I asked. Well, she typed, I think about the family members I've lost to the medical system, a system that failed to treat them with dignity or respect. Another student chimed in, and doctors don't think Black people feel pain the same as white people do, so they give us less medicine. Yeah, typed a third student. I really want to be a doctor, but I'm terrified to be a patient. It is important to understand that mistrust of the medical system is not only driven by historical atrocities in the distant past, it is also due to current racism in the medical system. A myriad of studies validate the statements made by those students. Black patients, including Black children, are given less pain medications compared to white patients with comparable diagnoses or complaints. It is inaccurate to explain away racial health disparities by citing poverty and lack of healthcare access without acknowledgement of the impact of racism, because this suggests that education and income protect Black women from racial inequities. This suggests that Black people are just poor, without acknowledging the centuries of barriers in our way. Did you know that the gap between Black and white infant mortality rates is wider than it was in 1850 when most Black women were viewed as chattel? Did you also know that a Black woman with an advanced degree is more likely to lose her baby than a white woman with less than an eighth grade education? Because studies show that chronic racial stress affects birth outcomes. Were you aware that college educated Black women are more likely to die from pregnancy related complications than white high school dropouts, in part due to racism and neglect by healthcare providers? A recent NPR survey showed that over 1/3 of Black women say that they were discriminated against in the hospital by healthcare workers. I use statistics like these in all of my racism speeches, including this one, because honestly, I don't think I'll be believed by some of you if I don't. I learned quickly that sharing my painful anecdotes of my family's experiences with the medical system would often be answered with, Are you sure it was racism? Can you prove it? So I began arming myself with data. My work in systemic racism is synonymous with my work to become a great psychiatrist. I refuse to separate the two because I believe that rectifying systemic racism is not a matter of interest, but of necessity. Not politics, but human rights. To that end, I would describe what I do in three categories: medical education, research, and clinical. In medical education, I push for racial disparities to stop being taught without acknowledging the racism that created them. I challenge attendings who give us medical vignettes with Black women consistently portrayed as poor single mothers. I share my concerns when ancestry is confused with race by lecturers, and I explain that race is a social construct and race-based medicine is wrong. In research, my overall objective is to increase representation of Black individuals in academic studies and to document and mitigate the trauma of racism on the mental and physical health of the Black population. But each research project came about because of my own personal experiences. I'll share one of these projects with you today. I wish I was white and had straight hair. Then I would be smart and pretty. My heart broke when these words were spoken by my friend's 5-year-old daughter after her first week at a predominantly white school. Her mother and I had been dreading this moment, but we'd known it would come. Those words had been uttered by so many Black girls we knew. I thought of the famous doll experiment conducted by Black psychologists Drs. Mamie and Kenneth Clark in the 1940s. The study visually exposed the effects of negative self-esteem on Black children as young as 3 years old due to segregation and the promotion of white people as superior and more deserving. When given a choice, Black children preferred the white doll. These ideas persist today. Studies have shown that Black girls as young as 5 are viewed as more mature and less in need of affection compared to white girls, also known as adultification. A 2019 Yale study found that teachers rated Black students lower in their math skills compared to white students, even when both students had identical test scores and identical approaches to learning. The existence of these negative perceptions has an adverse effect on the mental health of Black children, and the work of Claude Steele on stereotype threat also shows that the cognitive performance of Black children in academic settings is affected by these negative societal perceptions. If asked to identify their race, Black children performed worse on standardized tests. My research study aims to create a tool to appropriately capture Black girls suffering from low self esteem by asking questions that encompass the multi conceptual experiences of Black girls, from colorism to racism to the pressure to assimilate into white culture. It will then seek to develop an intervention to mitigate those adverse effects on self esteem. Now, allow me to conclude by getting more personal. I cannot discuss my clinical work in systemic racism without acknowledging the racism that exists right here at Yale. As a department, our goal is to become anti racist, but how can we become anti racist if we can't acknowledge what exists in our own backyard, the elephant in the room? Let's talk about LV2, our adolescent inpatient unit. As an intern, my Black patient was called the N-word numerous times by a white patient, and staff watched it happen with no intervention. Unfortunately, my patient was awarded the state with an overworked DCF worker, so he had no parents to fight for him. In a supposed place of healing, Black patients and staff are regularly called the N-word, and they are expected to deal with it. I defended my Latinx patients when they got screamed at for speaking Spanish, then penalized and accused of plotting. I understand Spanish, and their conversation was appropriate, I said to the nurse as she looked at me with anger. I later found out that there is no official YPH rule stating that patients cannot speak Spanish, but it was being enforced on the unit anyway. I listened to racist jokes about my Black patients on the regular. I watched staff seem to restrain Black patients immediately, but spend ample time de-escalating white patients. Of course, until I see the data, I will never know if my hypothesis is correct, but it warrants investigation nonetheless. LV2 is a toxic learning environment, and as a Black trainee, I felt othered all the time. I'm not alone in my experiences, but many residents are afraid to speak up for fear of being targeted. But many of us have lost sleep worrying about how kids are treated on LV2. As we work to become an anti-racist department, please continue to listen to our voices, but don't just give us your empathy, give us your support. Then take action with us, because we can't do it alone.